So, welcome to episode 2 of the Deal Flow podcast. This is a weekly podcast. BSCN, myself, is the host. Every week, we get on expert guests and specific topics, thought leaders in the space, and effectively, we just chat about the topic. We make predictions, we talk about the projects we like. It's very, very organic, so forgive the lack of structure that we have. But without further ado, I'm your host, Johnny Huang, Chief Editor at BSCN. Very, very proud to be joined by two phenomenal guests again this week. Our first guest is Mehdi, an absolute expert in the space. He does investment and partnerships at Animoca Brands, a very, very well-known organization. We're also joined by Kamran, who is the founder of both BSCN itself and also manages MH Ventures, one of the most active and well-respected venture capital funds in the industry. How are you doing today, gents?
Thank you, Johnny.
I'm good, thank you very much.
So, first question, a very, very open one, just to get us kicked off. Which trends, if any, have you guys noticed in the 2024 GameFi Web3 gaming landscape?
Yeah, I'll start with this. Yeah, so I think in 2024, even though year has only had few months, but we have seen couple of repricing of all the gaming projects out there. In 2022, later half, and 2023, kind of everybody was cutting off GameFi as a sector. But now it kind of seems like people have started to reprice the fact that retail in Web3 understand gaming, understands culture. DeFi sometimes and sometimes infrastructure can go over the head. And because of that reason, we have seen multi-billion-dollar launches like with Pixels, with Mavia, and there's so many other big ones coming. So I think the first trend we see is multiple repricing of the sector itself. And it makes sense because retail in Web3 understands it. The second trend, which is very, very interesting, I see, is retail becoming also savvy in a way that the projects they are trying to buy or are very bullish on are more like ecosystem play. So there is an element of financialization there, rather than like any casual game. They won't get that $1 billion valuation. Only those projects that are getting like those higher valuations are actually when those projects are thinking along the lines of having an ecosystem. So let's say multiple games, couple of infrastructure projects, or ecosystem within the game itself, where the game progression and the depth of the gameplay is a platform in itself. Like it's very deep and has multiple underlying economies and interactions that are happening. So one example of that is Pixel, and one of the more ecosystem plays Ronin, even though not a gaming project, but a gaming chain, but multiple games being built on top. So I think those are like a couple of trends that are on top of my mind at the moment.
So just really, really quick one to follow up. You know, you talk about how sort of 2022, 2023, we definitely had this sort of flight from GameFi, or at least a real regression from where we sat in 2021. Why was that? Was it a simple case of, valuations and token prices crashing, 80, 90, 95%, or was there something more to it?
I think it's because of the fact that retail understands gaming more intuitively than DeFi. I wouldn't say that valuations are not overstretched. I think valuations have kind of gotten ahead of itself. Again, not financial advice, but I feel like valuation are slightly ahead of the fundamentals at the moment. But I think the only way...
It's a bubble.
Yeah, it's slightly on the overvalued side. But one thing that's becoming really evident is retail understands Web3 gaming. They don't understand DeFi. They don't understand infrastructure. So when you kind of understand something, you're willing to pay a slight premium. So I think from that perspective, it makes sense. The second thing is, this is a new mental model I've been like trying to frame after speaking with like GameFi investor, is in Web2 gaming, the valuation will always be lower than Web3, because in Web3, games are more about supporting the asset rather than the other way around. In Web2, it's about the gameplay first. In Web3, it's about, okay, this is the game, these are the assets, the game supports the asset. So the communities are forming around assets, those assets act as platform, and then games and other things support them. So because of that rationale, the asset itself has a network effect and it becomes a content play, and game is just one instrument that's expressing that content, right? So for that reason, I think retail firstly gets it, and because of that financialization of assets and game assets, it makes sense that the valuation will be always be slightly higher than, let's say, Web 2 counterpart.
Cam, do you have anything to add there? I've definitely got a couple of follow-up questions for sure.
Yeah, so maybe my outlook on this is that, going back to 2020 or 2021, 2022, everyone was just in a rush, again, like we spoke in the last podcast about narratives. And hence people were just they were buying games off Steam, rebranding them into Web3, or just introducing some blockchain mechanics. Now what we're seeing is that all of that shit is pushed to the side, and we're about to see, if not already, like actual AAA games that were funded back in 2022, 2021, that are going to come out now, and actually we're going to see gameplay, and then we're going to notice if there's actual gamers in Web3 that actually want to play. I think like the biggest trend now that I would say is that games have realized the two-token model doesn't work, and then also if they really want to succeed, they can't just be native on Web3. They have to be 50-50, Web 2 and Web 3. Because, all and most gamers are on Web 2. It's still the biggest. And I also believe that Web 3 needs Web 2 gaming more than Web 2 needs Web 3. So, in saying that, I think that most games do have to have that the side of like being on a Steam or being on a Epic Games, or and just have their platform so people can play it.
I mean, that's a question in itself, right? And Cam, I know that you and we were both on a space, an interview with ArcStream last week, talking a little bit about this, with regards to deepen AI, and the answer seemed pretty clear, right? There were some very, very obvious advantages there. Does gaming even need Web3? Does gaming need to be in any way decentralized? Does gaming need these fungible assets? Is it necessary, or is it a buzzword slapped on what is effectively just blockchain tech?
Again, like I can go back and forth on this, and I'm, as I keep on talking to more people, I get swayed more on that. Yeah, it's good for the industry. I'm not opposed to it. I think it's great because now we're incentivizing. It's the same with like we spoke last about Deepin, right? Like you're incentivizing people to play, but there's just a negative effect on that on the gaming side, because now you're introducing a financial reward that's stuck to the game, which when these rewards are depleted, that it just takes away from users wanting to play, right? And then they shift to something new. Everyone in crypto has just got a short attention span. But yes, I do think it's needed. I think it is a nice thing of like being able to NFT your your gun or your whatever it may be, your materials, and then alongside that earn rewards. I just feel like we need to get away from these high rewards. Once that has come down, then yes, the people will actually play because they want to play, and not because they can earn $100 or $1,000. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. On that note, do I see big gaming studios such as an Epic Games or whoever else pivoting into blockchain? I don't know yet. Like I'm more towards no, but who knows, right? Like this industry can massively change them, but they might see a positive to it. I just don't see them giving up too much revenue.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, one thing that for context, before I was with BSCN, I was working in VC, an institutional investment on that side, and we did speak to GameFi projects. And one thing that this quite impressive founder, like won't name names or anything, told me is that it takes 4 years and $10 million to create a AAA game. Which in theory, if that's true, which it may well not be, I'm sure Mehdi, you can interject and provide a better explanation. But if that is the case, then some of those projects that were funded in 2021 with tens, 20s of millions, provided they haven't burnt through that runway like absolutely no one's business, which cannot be taken for granted. But then in theory, we should start to see some of these AAA rated games coming out in the next sort of 12, 24 months, in theory, right? Does that seem feasible to you, or is that total bollocks?
I mean, like let's see, let's rewind a little bit. So I would reframe the question. I feel like games do not need Web3. I think culture needs Web3. So even with gaming, what we see around is majority of the content is consumed outside of the games versus inside. Like, let's say you play a game, you try and go and find cheat codes or you discuss on forums. So there's a culture around it, and I think Web3 facilitates that culture. So for example, I really like this skin, or I really like this NFT, which represents a gun. Web3 allows me to own that, right? Like I am the only owner. I can fractionalize it. I can trade it. I can lend. I can borrow. So I think Web3 unlocks that, and then also allows the fact that if you have an asset, you can interact in a Discord and act as an access pass. So I feel like more than gaming, Web3 unlocks the culture part of the gaming. And to your second question, regarding AAA game, I feel like if we rewind back, the way mobile gaming kind of went on that exponential curve, the starting was for games like Angry Birds. So I think with Web3, we just went ahead of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's have a AAA game with all of the big studios and spend like multiple, like $1,000, like not $1,000, like millions of dollars to kind of develop it. But I feel like the immediate, like short to medium run, you will see fun, casual games that have very, very deep economies, deep communities, which are like spending thousands of dollars to find meaning and to find that culture outside of the game. So one example I'll give you is Pixel. It's a farming game. The FDV is 4 billion, and it is on trajectory to have 10 million MAUs. So I think for me, AAA games sounds fancy, but I think in terms of mass adoption of Web3 culture, might be the casual games or that mid strategy type games that achieves that. That
You make a really good point. That is
Yeah.
a really cool point.
That being said, I think Cam over here will agree. We have multiple AAA games about to release as well, so I'm excited about that as well. Like Gunzilla, Illuvium. So I think we throughout the spectrum, I think we'll see everything in Web3, and I think that's what excites me about GameFi.
Actually, very, very brief interruption. Do you guys play any games these days? Either Web 2 or Web 3, mobile, console, anything?
So I've never played a mobile game. I don't know why. I've just never thought about having my phone there and
Because
playing.
those are the ones that I
I've
have
not been
time
that
for these days. I don't have time to
Yeah.
sit down for like 3 hours.
And then I was a big gamer, MMO RPG, like back in the day when I was younger. I used to love that.
Which ones? Which ones?
Probably no one knows about it, but called Animoca Online.
I'm
It
Googling.
was a really big game. It was really good. It's on Steam now, but it's just not active anymore. They were never on Steam before. They had their own, whatever you call it. But honestly, it was probably one of the best games I ever played. Just like their whole the whole game thought out the way it was in terms of like. Anyway, it doesn't. I'm not going to get into it. I then also played Counter-Strike Source. Was a big player of Counter-Strike Source. Loved it so much. And then Dota 2 as well. Dota 2 was just too hard to play. Like really, I used to love playing it, but it's like you need to be really good at it.
Yeah.
In the UK, and I don't know, maybe have it elsewhere, but they have things called like iSeries. It's like gaming series where you go for a couple of days, and you're in this like big. It could be a warehouse. It could be whatever. Just think of it like what do they call it in crypto when they go and have a hackathon? It's like that, but it's just a gaming one, and people go there and they meet, they just game together, and then there's like tournaments. So I used to do that, me, my cousins, my brother. But now, like for the last, I'm going to say maybe the last 6 years, maybe, not been able to play. And I just have a battle with myself of like, one, I don't have the time now, but two is the battle is I can't waste time playing. Like there's so much more stuff to do, and I'm like that hour is just wasted. So yeah, I don't. Short answer, I don't play anymore.
I was more fan
Mehdi,
of
what about you?
consumption-based, like story-based games. So things like God of War, things like open world games like GTA. I just felt like I have this tendency in my personality to get really addicted with competitive games, player versus player games. So I used to just consume the story-based games. And right now, mostly play test rather than playing games for fun. It's more about play test and then just looking at those games professionally. And even during the play test, I found out, at least in Web3, the queues are not in the game itself, it's around the communities. So yeah, short answer, don't play it as much. Also, kind of cognizant of my personality that I get really addicted. That said, I'm actually looking forward to GTA
That's fair.
6. As Cam was alluding, I might take a couple of days off from work and just like complete all the mission and kill a few folks there.
When are we getting GTA 6? I remember because the trailer got leaked in early December, but when are we actually getting the game? Is it a 25 job? It's not this year, is it?
I don't think so. The rumors have it will be 2025, and rumors also have it's opening up financialization. It will have elements of crypto and open economy. So if you look at the last GTA 5, there were missions about, let's say if you do some sort of a stuff like kill someone, the stock market will go down because you killed a CEO or something. I don't remember the mission exactly, but they were trying to experiment with like in-game stock markets, and I feel like GTA, like the new GTA,
Right.
will have all of that on steroids, and I won't be surprised if it has loads of crypto and NFT elements. I've heard rumors that there are people who have actually done some build test.
Yeah, so we obviously we covered a lot of the GTA stuff when it was, or at least around the trailer when it was really hyped up, sort of Q4 2023, and there were rumors, but we did our best to sort of look and see whether there were any confirmations and stuff like that. And I think at the moment, unless like if it's a case of people familiar with the matter type thing, there weren't any really clear indicators or guarantees that, but that would be awesome. That'd be awesome. But what would that mean for Web2, for Web3 gaming?
I think that is the domino effect. Like, my personal thoughts, if GTA actually do that and actually bring in the blockchain side of things, it just starts a domino effect. And because every other studio that builds games now will just see like what doors have been opened and what the capabilities are, meaning that they'll start to put people on there, make their own Web3 team to build something like that. And I think that then changes the whole mind frame for people like myself, right? Like, who are on the sidelines, on the 50-50 sidelines. It just confirms that this would be huge. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, also just like the credibility. If Rockstar Games did it, suddenly it kind of, for better or worse, it kind of opens up the door and it makes other parties feel a bit more comfortable with it potentially.
But yeah, there are Web3 games by big
but anyway,
studios,
just to
right?
move
Like
back away
Ubisoft
from,
is working on a game which has there's a whole blockchain called Oasis 3 and like loads of Japanese studio building on top, like Sega, Ubisoft, Capcom. So I think a lot of studios are experimenting.
But no, I mean, just to move back from that for a second, just to move back from like the innovations and where we're going to see sort of new elements of the space come to fruition. We spoke a little bit about at the beginning about 2021, about that last sort of gaming hype cycle, if you want to call it. Which projects are still around, right? We spoke a bit about how Axie, very much a buzzword or a watchword, so to speak, in that period. But obviously, it's not around in any way the same way that it was previously. There's been a shift towards developing Ronin, talking about ecosystem plays. Mehdi, are there any sort of pure games that were hyped or at least discussed, whatever it was, 2-3 years ago, that are still discussed, played, being developed?
I think last cycle was like a couple of years ago. So in those cycle, there were token launch without the game. So there wasn't a game, and now we'll have those games. So a few examples being like Illuvium was one, right? Like there wasn't a game. There was like just like a trailer and just like a couple of leaks. But now I think we're going towards a trajectory where those tokens that will launch will have a proper game. So I think one was Illuvium, Axie. I think still has the highest DAUs, if I'm not mistaken. I kind of feel for Axie that they were like first mover in terms of a space which was like kind of brand new, like play to earn, play and earn, all of that stuff. But they definitely did innovate and just opened up a whole new financialization of things, which other projects copied, failed, reiterated on. Lots of lessons there. And then I think Axie Infinity is now also becoming a platform play where they have this metaverse called Lunacia. They'll have multiple games inside there. Then there is a Ronin where they kind of the Axie IP becomes relevant there. So I think that is still a very big brand for Web3 gaming. So yeah, those are the few that comes to mind. Like another one is Gunzilla, even though it wasn't launched, but they have been raising since 2021, and I think they'll come to market pretty soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, there has been some promises, but then as Cam was highlighting earlier, a lot of games were just like folks of like already established Web2 games. I think those didn't survive. I think those games that are doing well are either high fidelity with native and novel elements, or those projects that have like a very very strong community, like Axie Infinity, Illuvium, so on and so forth. So I think community here matters as well, not just the gameplay. Like community is of utmost importance because they take that IP forward and consume that content. Uh, so I think those projects that are still relevant have that element of community that just didn't go away.
Mehdi, I have a question for you, or just what your thoughts are. So back then, Axie Infinity, started the two token model. They also started breeding, right? Like your characters can breed other characters and so forth, and create this loop. Do you think that Axie Infinity blew up the GameFi industry back then and made it a
Yeah.
bubble because everyone copied their two token model, and even though it wasn't the best, and then also this loop on NFTs is being birthed constantly.
I mean, yeah, everybody did copy it brainlessly. Some, I still remember some GameFi projects were actually smart about it. Like Stepin was one, kind of like copied that Axie Infinity, but like for breeding walk and earn shoes, right? Like similar model, but for like different purpose. So people did copy it. Some people copied more intelligently, but everybody struggled. I think the thing with Axie was COVID happened. Loads of people were inside their home. It also kind of like spurred up in Philippines where people are very entrepreneurial. They just wanted to earn extra money. And this token, like the two token model, it's kind of innovative in a way that if you're early, you do make a lot of money, but then things starts diminishing and you come to a point that as people start selling, that returns are gone. Um, so so yeah, a lot of people copied it. There were a lot of lessons learned that what are some of the elements that are sustainable and what are not sustainable. I think people realize that the AXS and SPL model, the SPL model might be better off if you do it kind of off chain. It's more of a gamification currency, and then you have a value accrual currency which is AXS. And I think this is what Pixels did, right? So they also had two models, two token model, but then quickly realized that they were reiterating and had multiple different syncs, and they also realized that it won't work right now. So just to also give you context, like these game economies, which have like very very complicated progression system, it's very very difficult to even balance those economy in Web two. So if you look at Eve Online or if you look at Diablo, they have data for like 10 years 15 years of their user history, and then even then they kind of struggle sometimes balancing the economy. Now you take that and you put it in Web3 and you put that on steroid because now economy is open, like everything is tradable. That makes it even more difficult. So even the soft currency, it's very very difficult to balance because there's so many variables and so many simulations that you have to do. You don't know the user base, you don't know the geography, where will the people come from, and then in Web3 we basically open that economy and make things tradable, so makes that job 10x more difficult. So I think after that, what realization come was, let's just have one fun currency and one value accrual currency, and that fun currency doesn't have to be financialized. And I think this is what a lot of projects, even with MMORPG games, farming games, are heading towards in terms of a tokenomics trend.
That's really cool. I mean, one one theory that I had, and you guys can absolutely slap me and call me a moron if it's way oversimplistic, but I think that guilds, I mean, the likes of sort of YGG, Merit Circle, we've already seen them pivoting away from being guilds really, but I think they actually had a major role in what you might call like the downfall of GameFi, in particular games like Axie Infinity, right, where the sinks for SLP, I think in particular, were breeding oriented, right? The idea that you create more axes, as they were called, or still are called, I guess, and that guilds sort of undermine that model. The idea that actually, no, you can have limited resources and therefore limited demand for these sinks for SLP, but actually, still have loads of people earning SLP and but with the same assets. Does that make sense?
I feel like with guilds, they were slightly ahead of the time. It was a business idea, it was a business model. I think this is also a trouble when, let's say, you launch a very innovative game like XC, who have a first mover. Nobody has done this ever, and they're kind of navigating a space that nobody has walked, right? So they did this two token model, and then guilds came in and be like, okay, if this works, we have an interesting model where you can form a guild. So I think both the parties didn't know what was like in terms of part dependency. What does the future look like? And both were trying to innovate. So now the guilds realize that this might not be the business model they were after. So I think some of them have pivoted, some have made chains, some have made kind of like on-chain. So even though the ethos is still the same, like Marriage Circle still has the gaming guild ethos, but they have kind of pivoted more towards L2. So the community is still there, but more in terms of like a gaming chain. YGG has kind of moved towards on-chain achievements, which they're also kind of behaving like a guild, but rather than just farming tokens, they're like, you do these X, Y, and Z quests, and you get these X, Y, and Z airdrops and points, which will so the ethos wise, it's kind of similar. You have the guild model, but I think the level of activity has changed. So rather than just being a farmer, now you have to do quests. Instead of being a farmer, now you have to be an on-chain user. So I think those pivots were done rightly so. Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of crypto, right? Like when you are doing something innovative, these are things that happen.
And just to add to what Mehdi's saying as well is that I don't. And again, look, I think guilds are good to a certain extent. I think they were just over leveraged. Games wanted them because they wanted players, and players just added value to their token, and also the hype of their game is one. And then two, the owners of the guild were just loving it because they were making a good amount of money until the bubble burst. I don't know if it's right to say that they shouldn't have been guilds. They should have been more of clans. And clans being like, if it's a skill-based game, these guys are forming teams that are going to compete against each other. I think that's what the next cycle is going to be. Like a face clan in Web3 or whatever they may be. I think that's what is actually needed, because then that makes the game competitive rather than farming, right? That's how I see things, and I think that's the way we need to move forward.
Different genres.
I mean, this comes back to,
Yeah, so I agree to Cam.
Sorry, yeah, carry on, Mehdi.
So I think the different genres. So I think we are already seeing some signs of clans being formed, like things like Gonzilla, Sharpnel, these high fidelity shooter game, high stakes. I think we'll have that esports element, clan element. But then we are also seeing, and we'll see these games come in market like Pixels and EVE Online, but the Web3 version, where you'll have your clans, but you might also have your guilds. So guilds, in essence, even both clans and guilds in essence are just like coordination mechanism, where these players just like coordinate and achieve something. So in clan, like in shooter game, it's okay, let's be the best guild or clan, or in farming game, let's be somebody that just owns the most resources. So I think there's just like a framing issue with the genre. I think we'll have both. What Cam described, I feel like shooter game, absolutely perfect model for this. Like we'll have clans which fight each other to win the prize. But I think in farming games, you kind of need to have a guild where you kind of like gather resources and coordinate together, so if that makes sense. Like MMO games and farming games. So I think you'll have mix of both. But I think the guild will take another form. Like there will be micro guilds rather than like one big guild that just owns the whole Web3 space. I think that is gone. I think we'll see more micro guilds.
I mean, I remember like this must have been, I don't know, maybe like 2014, maybe. But the people that I was, within these sort of guilds or clans with, I was playing Clash of Clans with like 3 guys that I was at school with. That's what the sort of guild, the clan was for me. And it kind of comes back to, and I absolutely love this, and I've never heard it articulated like that. But when Mehdi said that actually culture needs Web3 gaming rather than sort of the gaming industry itself, which is awesome. But I think we touched on this a little bit. But to move on to the next question, I'm kind of going to reframe it to make it a little bit more clickbaity, right? But can you guys both pick 2 L1 or L2 ecosystems, different ones? So feel free to battle over who gets to go first, that you think are going to play host to like what you'd call the GameFi revolution, but you're not allowed to say immutable.
So are you saying we pick two L1s or L2s that will do really well for the gaming sector? Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. But you're not actually no, you're not allowed to pick immutable or Ronin. It's hard. It's
It
much harder,
started with
isn't
the
it?
mutable. Now you have also included Ronin. Um, so since the fact that you have banned
Yeah.
those names, it just feels like those two names will have a role to play.
I have an answer, and this is only because I read something on. I think CoinGecko did a report, and this was going back last year sometime. I'm not going to actually say Avalanche. I do think Avalanche has a good competitive narrative of what they're doing with their subnets and stuff. But I'm not going to say them. I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm going to say Scale, which probably a lot of people haven't heard of. I think Scale is going to scale. With their like no fee based games being able to go on there, build is fast. The only thing is that I think, and they had like huge funding as well. Like I think the top tier one funds were actually invested back like 2021, I think, maybe earlier than that. So they've got a lot of money to actually now start to, which we're already seeing, they start to bring over a lot of games. We're also now trying to take on the DeFi hype and also the AI narrative as well, and building these selected chains to have these different projects on the ecosystem. So I do think Scale is going to do really well. I think they just need to get their name out there a bit more. I think the second one, which back in 2021 or 2022 was known for it, but somehow like I think what's going on is just buried them on the gaming side. Not everything else like is super hype. I think Solana's going to do well. I do think Solana will do well because it's able to host the games. It's super fast, super cheap, and we're already seeing like a few AAA games coming out of there. You know, one being Star Atlas,
And the Peril.
if they ever launch.
And Peril as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think Solana is going to do well. I just think that gaming part of the minute is really quiet for them, and I think that's just because it's buried by the memes.
Yeah, I agree with Cam.
Fair.
I think Solana I think it might even become the ecosystem of fully on-chain games. Like, thing we hear, right? Like autonomous world, something that hasn't been as a narrative hasn't picked up. But I think a couple of years time, you'll see fully on-chain games, and I think Solana will have a huge role to play there. Apart from some of the other bigger games that are launching, I also think
Are you saying that just because it's performant, basically?
performance, high throughput, low latency. Low latency is also important, and low gas fees. So let's say when you have the whole game inside like a chain, and every interaction is a transaction, you need something like Solana, where let's say we end a farming game, and Johnny, I come to you and I give you some resources, and basically we craft something together. Every time we craft something, there is a fees associated. I don't think we can do that on Ethereum, but on Solana we can like do it like thousands of times, hundreds of times. So I think for that matter, I think Solana will do well, and I think Sui also has that potential. Sui is kind of like Solana in that manner. I just feel like it's just early days for Sui, and we have seen with Sui and Aptos like interesting studios, especially the Web2 studios, kind of leveraging them. And I think it will just take a couple of years before like some big names come out of that. So for me, those will be like a couple of ecosystem that in the future for gaming could do really well.
Some really cool answers, and I'm glad that I didn't let you guys say immutable or Ronin. I think Sui is a really interesting one. Like I met a while ago the team behind Ethos, which I think is now just a sort of move language wallet, but was very much Sui focused. And they put out that game. It was like I forgot what it was, but it was a version of 2048. You know, that tile sliding game that we've all played on our phones at one point or another. Yeah. And that just like, do you remember what happened with Sui transactions? It was just, it went absolutely nuts. They broke records and stuff purely because of that one game. And I don't think people were even playing it for an airdrop. I think people were just messing around with it. So that I think is a really, really interesting answer. The other one that I would say, and this is partly because of the Denkin upgrade and what it did to L2 gas, but also because they just launched a $400 million fund is Arbitrum. And I'm really curious to see what happens there because I think of Arbitrum as really a DeFi layer two, right? A lot going on in the DeFi users. I wouldn't
I know a
necessarily
lot
think
of
of it as a
gaming
gaming
studios using
L2,
Arbitrum
but
for
that could change.
L3, like launching their chain on Arbitrum as a L3. So one of
Right.
our portco, Param Lab, has intention. A lot of project like Zai has a gaming L3, and I know like few anime based chains and like stuff like that just launching their own chain using Arbitrum. And I think the gaming fund they recently launched 400 million. I think will just accelerate that. So directly or indirectly, Arbitrum will,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Really, really quick one because I know we're running out of time a little bit here. But I think if I'd asked you this question in maybe late 2020, mid 21, maybe even early 22, Polygon would have been a name that we would be speaking about. And I don't think it. Do you remember like Sunflower? I forgot what it was called, but it was, the activity going
Sunflower
on within
Lands.
Sunflower Lands, right? The activity going on within the
yeah.
Matic ecosystem from a GameFi perspective was newsworthy
It
in and of
is.
itself.
I think that the Polygon. So this is my take on it, and this is just coming from someone that's just an onlooker, right? And I'm also had a look at some analytics as well. So I think Polygon, geared themselves up to be the gaming chain. I just don't know what happened. I feel like they had a strong hold on it back then, but I do feel like their chain just had issues. And I mean that from a cost perspective. As much as it is an L2, if you actually use it as it's a general user as well, it becomes expensive at some points. It was super slow at some points. There was like lags. Not saying there was a pause, is one. And then I think that they were the main things. Like I was, doing stuff back in 21 because I was a part of we spoke last time, doing some stuff on the gaming side with NFTs and whatever. And it was really slow and also became super expensive, even as an L2. So I think that's where they lost a lot of hope and games wanting to pivot. But that being said, like even till today, there's still a decent amount of games on there. I think there's one Asia game that probably none of us have heard, but again looked at analytics, called Matrix Fire. And it's had like 12 million active users.
Yeah.
Right. So and that's recent.
Are they all
so.
genuine as well? Is that data in any way?
I don't know. I don't know if they're genuine.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sometimes hard to tell, but that's nuts.
I think Polygon Gaming is doing fantastically well, but I don't think people know that what Polygon strategy is giving all the games to Immutable X. So over here the play is distribution. So what Polygon is doing, taking all the games and encouraging them to launch on Immutable X because Immutable X is powered by Polygon ZK EVM. So I think that's their strategy. So their strategy is we give our CDK, chain development kit, to everybody out there. So their gaming chain is immutable and they're now focusing on other people to like start their chain. So I think that's their end game. And since everybody will be using the CDK, Polygon then can become the aggregation layer. So I think what happened there was them focusing all the gaming effort towards immutable. Because they have a strategic partnership and they're using the same.
Yeah. So wait. So how did they?
So that means go on.
No, I was just going to say how does the Polygon ecosystem how do Matic holders accrue value from that in the end, in like a scalable way? Like it does sound like an interesting strategy, and I know that their focus is very much sort of CDK shaped at the moment, right? They're pitching to all different with BL2s to get them to use that SDK, that CDK. But where's the ultimate value accrual?
I think that's a good question. I think it will be an immutable token, but then let's say if Polygon wins the distribution war, where everybody uses the chain development kit, then the value accrues to the player who aggregates everything. So I think Polygon end goal is to go after that value accrual, which I think is a bit more ambitious than let's say immutable. I also don't know the arrangement with immutable and Polygon. Maybe there is like a revenue split, or maybe there is some sort of that arrangement. I don't know.
Fair.
But I do know, seeing in the market, that they're working very closely. Like they help each other out a lot. So any game Polygon has, they do encourage immutable. If you want to launch your own L2 with ZK, then you basically use it through the CDK if you're a game. if you just are a dApp, you launch it on Immutable. Um, yeah, and within that ecosystem, if we combine, there's so many interesting games like Gods Unchained, Param Labs, Farcana. So I think combined wise, they're still like one of the leading game L2s. Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
vibrant ecosystem.
yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so two questions that I think our audience is really gonna be interested in or resonate with. Both directed to the two of you as investors. So when we asked a similar question for Deepin last week. If you haven't checked that out, then please go and check out the episode. There was some seriously cool alpha in there. But when it comes to investment approaches to GameFi, specific, especially fungible tokens, so let's leave sort of NFTs out. Is there a specific approach that you guys would not recommend, obviously, because nothing's financial advice, but that you think is meritable?
So I think it's looking at games, and this can be used across the board, right? You're looking at investments or games that are things that cannot be replicated, right? Easily. So when you look at AAA games, like you said at the beginning, it's really hard to create a AAA game. It takes years on years. So like it takes 3 to 4 years to actually build one, and that is true. And hence why we're going to see some now come out in fruition. But if you're looking at an investment and the game is easy to build and it can be replicated easily, or it can be bought off of, assets can be bought, which we saw loads of assets being bought off like one of these websites, and someone went and bought a game off Steam. I think they're bad investments because there was no real thought process in the game being built, and there's no lifespan to it. That's how I look at things. So, Mehdi's, spoke about Gunzilla, again, a portfolio company of MH as well. We invested in them back in, I think, 2021, maybe even, was it 2020? I don't know, a long time ago. And these guys are going to come out, and it's taken this long to actually build a game, and like, if you've seen demos of it, it's a top tier AAA. And this is a game that can't be replicated in a week or 2, 6 months. It's impossible. So they're the plays that you want to be looking out for. And if you're looking at investments, you're looking on the long horizon. And if that's what you are as an investor, then yes, like look at games that are going to be around for a long time. If you look at smaller games, who knows how long their lifespan is going to be. And that's how I look at things. Make sure that things can't be replicated.
Yeah, for me, gaming is particularly tough. Like, you're taking a bet on content, which content achieves network effect or virality, because habit change, people taste change. So it's very, very difficult to sometimes take a bet. That's why you have a fairly high fail rate in traditional Web2 gaming. But I think in Web3 gaming, what has worked for me is rather than looking at the content, the hack is look at the community and look at the stickiness of that community. So when I say word community, you can use it interchangeably with IP. So just to give an example, like was really bullish on Param Labs when nobody was like even looking at that game. And I was early and contrarian there because what I found was the community is a GameStop and Wall Street Bet community. Everybody was focused on gameplay, and they were like, oh, the gameplay is okay. It's not like, let's say, like Gunzilla. But then you have this amazing community that will make sure that they play the game, they have fun with it, and encourage them to build further games. So for me, I think the mental model I have is look at the IP/community first and foremost. So more than the game itself, for me in Web3, it's about the meta game, the game outside of the game. Like what's the community doing? What's the coordination there? What's the IP there? And let's say one content of there fails, can the community and the IP deliver something else that just elevates it or keeps on delivering in terms of the progression of the life cycle of the game? So for me, that's one thing I pay a lot more attention to because content, again, in Web3 is tough, super tough. So community for me is the biggest one. So right now, the two gaming projects that I was kind of bullish on early on, just looking at the community, was Revolving Games and Param Labs. Again, both ecosystem play and both had like strong IP and community. Again, nothing here financial advice.
No, those are really cool answers and slightly different ones. I think both of which could even be applied to some other verticals, some other sectors within the space as well. All right, one final question that I think everybody's going to be very excited about. Would like you both to pick. I'd say two, but one or two tokens that are already live, so past TGE in the gaming ecosystem that you think are definitely worth keeping an eye on for 2024. And again, not financial advice in any way, personal opinions and riffing only, but would love if you guys could make one or two picks.
For me, it would be Ronin.
Fair play. Purely because of that whole, looking for value accrual in a major
Yes.
ecosystem kind of aspect. Fair play. Do you have
So
another
we're
one or
picking
is
a
it just
game or
Ronin?
we're picking an ecosystem?
I mean, I was slightly lenient on Mehdi, letting him pick an ecosystem there. Like that's like you know, it's bending the rules a little bit. But I'd say either. I'd say either. If Mehdi can have either, you can definitely have either, Cam. But not IMX. It's not allowed.
Um, so if I'm going to talk about ecosystem, uh, I don't know why I feel that Beam or Merit Circle is going to do well. The indie gaming
That's
is really
really
cool.
fair.
I do believe that they're going to succeed, and I think they already are. And they're incubating a lot of games. And their transition from being a guild, and I know that Mehdi was saying that I already have that
Mm,
part still, but that building that chain as well was like, I think was really cool. And there's also honing down on a certain like niche. And then in terms of games, that is already live. Um, and I think that there was a lot of hype back in the day, and I think there still is. It's just taking them a long time. I do think like Star Atlas is gonna do really well still,
that's fair.
but I think they just need to get out into the full game.
Yeah, I think that both really really cool answers, and I think really justifiable answers actually. One that I feel was really remiss of me not to focus more on was Merit Circle's Beam. I was wondering if I know that you guys are probably both well versed in it. Could you give our audience just a little bit of context on that specific ecosystem and why we think it's primed for great stuff? I mean, it's already
Yeah.
doing great stuff. In fairness,
Yeah, so I think it's for me personally, the whole thought process of like Merit Circle was they started as a guild. That's what they were looking to do, and then when they saw that the guild part wasn't, you know, had a long lifespan or was been able to come out of it from in during the bear market, they decided to pivot and they built their own chain. And I think their process was that we're not looking to put AAA games on here. That's not what it's about. We're not looking to have big ecosystem games. It's purely small games that are indie games. So now that we're seeing actually, I was speaking to a few actually, that they're, and so a lot of them are all built from scratch. And the smaller games they're really short like time frames. So they're like 20-30 minute gameplays. But you can keep coming back and earn rewards. And I think that's their whole thesis is we're not looking to, have a Star Atlas or have a Gunzilla on the chain. We just want really smaller games that we can have a user base that are able to play multiple games on our chain and they can hop to different games. I think that's why they'll succeed because all these players are able to play the game and not spend all day playing them.
I agree with Cam. I think similar to how we were forming thesis for Solana in last episode, I think fair to say some of these ecosystems like Merit Circle being like an index play for gaming. They've identified the niche. They're also investing and giving out grants. So yeah, so the thesis here will be index play of casual games and games.
it's really cool. It's really cool. Like I do think that the Beam ecosystem is one that I personally need to take a much closer look at. Like what they've achieved, almost what feels like subtly, is really really cool. So I definitely got to do some research there. Okay, so one question to wrap up, and we haven't really touched on this ecosystem much, despite it having what you'd probably call a pre-existing GameFi ecosystem. But B&B chain, like what are we seeing there at the moment? Is there a future for GameFi within that ecosystem?
Again, looking back at the last bull run when GameFi was a hype, we saw a few games actually building on there. I forgot what they were called. It was actually really, really hyped. Again, I was an investor back then and it did like 100x, so I was super happy. I just feel like that chain has become like really quiet on the gaming side. I don't know what happened, and I think going back to what Mehdi's mentioned before and other aspects, it's just about the culture. So maybe you can, definitely say here that there's just no culture on BNB chain for the gaming side, and a lot of the culture is elsewhere, and that could be on the L3 of Arbitrum or Solana, and I feel like Solana just in general has huge culture across multiple avenues. I think their whole chain is really like, I think their community is just strong-handed. Like, during the bear market, everyone was shat on them, and these guys were like, "Nah, mate, we're here to stay." Anyway, I just feel like the BNB chain, super quick chain, super cheap. But yeah, I couldn't personally put my hand or my finger on the reasons behind why I've not seen more stuff or more games coming out of there, or there isn't just not enough noise around it. We had Mobox as well. They were building small games, but they then pivoted to Bitcoin, actually, saying that on I think Merlin was it. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. The short answer is it does puzzle me. But yeah, I think there's just like Mehdi said on other things, there's just no culture.
I think maybe that's a fair answer. I mean, the impression that I've got just from looking at the stories that have come out around BNB chain is that they're almost moving in what feels like a Polygon type direction, right? With a number of different L2s that function with slightly different stacks. They've just, I think it was last week even, unveiled they're effectively their equivalent of an L2 CDK, right? SDK, and what that's actually going to mean for specific applications, especially the GameFi ecosystem within BNB chain. I think in truth, it's a bit, we can speculate all we want, but I think it's a little bit up in the air at the moment, unless you're sort of within the inner echelons of that ecosystem, right? But I think one question that we could end on, having spoken a little bit about tokens that are in the market, is tokens that are not yet in the market but are probably going to be. So we'd love if you guys could pick one or two private stage investments that you don't have to have invested in them. You might have missed a ticket, who knows? But to call them early stage, they're still doing fundraising, or at least have recently closed funding that you guys have a lot of conviction in going forward.
Yeah, I'll start. Um, Two. One is Prime Labs. Again, ecosystem play. First game called Caraverse also has a technology that allows you to convert any NFT collection into an in-game avatar. Have a super sticky community of GameStop and Wall Street Bets. And what they've done is they've used their technology to convert some of their NFTs and play in things like GTA and Fortnite. So very strong community, loves the product. They're doing a points program, and their community did their part in terms of amplifying. The founder is also very devoted and has done a fantastic job with culture. Speaking about culture, another great founder that did amazing culture from the word go was Amar from Revolving Games. So Revolving Game is another one I'm bullish on. Again, an ecosystem play. They're building multiple games. The NFT collection is doing really well, and Amar has also kind of become like their cult leader. Does all things in terms of direction where the ecosystem is going and the community responds. So for me, those two are my pick, more from the fact that both of these projects have a lot of culture, sticky community, and then both are ecosystem play in different ways.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I think you've mentioned Param Labs like 7 or 8 times this episode, so definitely one to watch is the impression that I'm getting for sure. But Cam, what about you? I know that you're very deep in the private stage investment space.
So I'm going to echo a bit of what Mehdi said with Param Labs. Again, an investor as well. But putting that aside, like I'm not again like one, yeah, shilling bags, but two, from an aspect of not shilling bags, I met the founder in Denver. I mean, we sat at the Animoca dinner together. And me and him just literally got on like super well. He's actually really young, super successful, especially in his previous business. And he's actually devoted into what he's building now. And they're the type of people that you want to be investing in. Like, he's an actual builder. He's actually not there because he can raise a lot of money and so forth. That's just a small little reward at the end. I'm actually excited in what he's got to build. And, you don't really see young founders that are just pure, mind frame is actually in the game of wanting to build and actually can manage a team as well. And he has all of those features and skill set. So I'm actually bullish on him, and that's like the biggest thing. Like if someone doesn't work within his game or his whatever he's building in the ecosystem, you just know straight away he can pivot. And if there's someone like that can just pivot, pick it up and move on, is someone that, long term is going to succeed. So I'll echo what Mehdi said. I'm super bullish on Param Labs. And the second thing is, in terms of games that are coming, I'm going to, say again, I think Gunzilla is going to be one of the biggest AAA games that comes out. I think these guys are, they're known builders in Web 2. They had they built games before. They've got a huge team. They've raised a ton of money, and they've not rushed anything. They've not rushed a token launch. They've not rushed putting a game out there. They know what they're doing. They actually focus a lot on like the Web 2 side as well, doing a lot of marketing on that side, because they inevitably know like the long game as well is like catering towards Web 2 gamers as well. So I think that's what they're doing. Like it's not just here's a game; it's purely for Web 3. It's a game. Here's Web 3, and also here's Web 2. And they've made some really cool stuff in terms of tech side and the blockchain side, like their own wallet and so forth. So yeah, I'm bullish on Gunzilla and Param Labs.
I think that's really cool because, I don't know, obviously you can do as much due diligence as you want on a project from a retail investor perspective, but you're not going to get that exposure. You're not going to sit down at them at a private dinner with Animoca, to sort of really pick their brains and understand their characters, right? You're going to be limited to spaces. So love that you guys are able to give some insight into sort of that side of the project. Really cool. And I'm definitely getting a bit of FOMO for not being exposed to Param Labs. So let me know if any angel tickets come up, although I think they're probably far past that at the moment.
I can sell you I can sell you my bag like 100x OTC
or
if you're interested.
Johnny, you can buy their NFTs.
Sure.
Again, not financial advice.
But if I bought them, then I couldn't report on them anymore, because then
I could just dump on you.
Conflict of interest, man. I'm sure you would. To be fair, you'd be monitoring my on-chain activity, and you probably got bots set up so that if I ever buy a token, MH and Animoca just absolutely wreck me, dump absolutely everything liquid straight on the phone to GSR.
Do you know what? There's one thing that I've, anyway, let's not get into it. I'm gonna cut that.
No, go on. We've got to get into it now.
No. No, let's not.
Mate, we can cut it out. What is it?
I don't know what you guys are chatting about. I just zoned out. I was like, what are you guys saying?
I have no idea what you're chatting about.
No, I don't know what I was going to say. I've lost my whole thought there.
All right. We'll let you off this time.